Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sobigoli. I'm a managing editor here at the Daily Maverick, and welcome to our food justice webinar. So today we're going to be talking about how marketing is impacting, or how digital marketing is impacting unhealthy food habits, and that lead to an increased consumption of ultra-processed foods and drinks, which of course we know are not great for our health. We'll be discussing some online tactics, such as the increase in fast food bundling options. You will have noticed, for example, online when you go, when you're trying to order a meal, it'll come with like a soft drink, particularly on delivery apps. The use of social media influencers to sway, particularly adolescents, in terms of their food choices. Also, the effect of outdoor advertising and how that impacts on our food choices. It's also going to be discussed and put onto the table that it's often unclear, what the funding mechanism is for social media influencers, as they have product placements of sodas and ultra processed foods on their various media channels. So the idea is to have a conversation about how we can help you and help everyone make better informed decisions for you and your family's nutritional needs. And with a purported over 5,000 fast food outlets across the country, I think it's well worth a discussion. So I have two knowledgeable experts with me today who are going to talk us through the topic. And of course, you as the audience are also welcome and encouraged to please participate in the discussion. There's a chat box you'll see where you can put all your questions, have some lively debates amongst yourself, and we'll of course pick up some questions and put it to our knowledgeable experts if we're here for them to answer some of your questions. But before we start, I think it's worth noting that South Africa is currently facing an immense strain to our public health system. Amongst this is the issue of non-communicable diseases like diabetes, hypertension, and obesity. And all of these have been linked to an increase in ultra-processed foods. So what are ultra-processed foods? For those who are not particularly technically savvy, like myself, that's bread, that's cool drinks, that's breakfast cereals, that's chips, that's all the fast foods that are very kind of easy for people to pick up, processed meats and things like sweets. Now look at what the stats are saying. So the stats are saying diabetes is already one of the top 10 causes of death globally, and it's even higher in high-income and middle-income countries. The prevalence of diabetes has rapidly increased in South Africa. From 4.5% in 2010, in 2019, it already jumped to 12.7%. Now, if that doesn't scare you, I'm not sure what will. In South Africa, more than 1 in 3 adults live with high blood pressure, and it is responsible for 1 in every 2 strokes and 2 in every 5 heart attacks. It's also been found that half of all adults in South Africa are considered overweight or obese, and worryingly, 1 in 6 children. And 1 in 5 are considered obese. So, as I said, I've got my two experts with me today to discuss these concerning marketing practices and how they're impacting on our health system. And they will help us talk through and help us understand more of the technical aspects around this. So enough from me. I'm now going to hand over to my guests to introduce themselves, their interest in the field of work within this kind of food justice space, and some opening remarks from their side before we get into the meat of the discussions. So let's start with you, Lisanne.
Thank you so much, Zuki, and thank you for hosting us this afternoon. So I'm an academic. I'm a lecturer and a researcher at Stellenbosch University in the Division of Human Nutrition, and my focus is on public health nutrition, but very specifically focused around maternal, infant, and young child nutrition, and all the various and different impacts that is caused by the various environments that surround mothers and children, and they are considered a vulnerable group. So I think just to kickstart kind of the thoughts around the debate, you've already heard that Zuki said that we have a crisis around malnutrition in South Africa, but it's also globally. So all countries in the world face a form or multiple forms of malnutrition. And this ranges from undernutrition to overnutrition and very many other forms of malnutrition in between. And there are, of course, very many different causes of malnutrition. Many of them are linked to poverty and social inequalities. But we also know that this crisis of malnutrition is being fueled by marketing of unhealthy and ultra-processed foods and also beverages. And this marketing has picked up tremendous pace and also tremendous reach through the internet and digital and mobile platforms. And we also know now that digital marketing is the most prevalent form of marketing worldwide. So what is quite concerning is that the online platform has this very targeted, where they also refer to this as behavioral targeting of products. And it makes it very effective. And what companies have found is that companies specifically, I'm referring here to that manufacture ultra-processed foods and fast foods, they have found ways in this space to market their foods. And it is very difficult to regulate those spaces. And it's also difficult to enforce regulation in these spaces. In contrast to that, if we think about healthcare professionals and nutritionists and dietitians who can share information on nutrition, it takes time for us to build rapport with our patients, and it takes time to build trust. And also not with individuals, but with target groups and with communities. In private healthcare, this comes at a cost. And we know in public health that the resources are extremely scarce. So the question really is, how should we navigate this? Do we need to become more skilled in social marketing, or how do we share? How do we frame our messages to make it more interesting and appealing to the public? So I think this platform is ideal this afternoon to discuss some of these issues. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much, Suzanne. Those were some very thought-provoking opening comments, and I'm sure we're going to come back to them and tease them out a little bit more. Lisa, your turn.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Zukisa, for having me today. This conversation is very important, so I'm glad to be part of it. So my name is Lisa Dice. I am a dietitian. I completed my studies in 2016, and I completed my master's last year. So I work as a research assistant at the University of the Western Cape in the School of Public Health. And the research that I'm involved in is mostly focused around child-directed marketing. And so with my master's project, I looked at influencer marketing of food and beverages on social media. And currently I'm working on another project that also looks at influencer marketing on social media, but just expanding on the platforms that wasn't covered in my master's project. So, you know, I'm well aware of all the different marketing techniques online. And like it was mentioned, it's alarming if you look at the different marketing tactics that's being used. I'm also working on a TV marketing project. So you see some overlap in the marketing techniques that's used on the different platforms. But, you know, the more traditional marketing is more obvious and more in your face, whereas the digital marketing is more manipulative and sort of underhanded. And so it's definitely a problem. It's contributing towards the different nutrition problems that we are facing in not only South Africa, but globally. And so having to look at child-directed marketing is very important, because that's sort of where it starts, where everyone gets exposed to these ultra-processed products. And like it was mentioned, it is very difficult to monitor these types of marketing strategies and to regulate that. There are no regulations in South Africa currently. And so the research that I'm in is trying to gather enough evidence to support for implementing regulations around child-directed marketing specifically. So I think today's discussion is very important, and I'm hoping that I can also spread some awareness about certain marketing tactics that maybe parents could look out for things that their children might be getting involved in online as well.
Thanks, Lisa. That was a very comprehensive introduction into the work that you're doing and the relevance to our discussion today. I just want to, because we're talking quite a bit seemingly around this issue of children, and I want to acknowledge that today is the beginning of the first day of International Breastfeeding Awareness Week, and I think that's a particularly good point to start at in terms of how marketing proliferates around this kind of area, where there's this kind of always raging debate between formula versus breastfeeding and how that works out in the marketing tactics that are employed there. And as you mentioned, Lisa, this is kind of when children get introduced right into that kind of ultra-processed world, ultra-processed food world, with the sugar that's contained in these formula formulations. I wonder if you want to just jump in there, Lisa, and give me your thoughts around that kind of marketing.
Yes, thank you so much. Indeed, we are entering International Breastfeeding Week today. It runs from the 1st to the 7th of August, and this year's theme is Closing the Gap, and that specifically refers to supporting everybody in this cause of getting as many mothers supported to breastfeed. So it also points to closing the gap on inequalities. So that is interesting, because we will at some point in this discussion also speak about the rights of the child and how that is infringed in this marketing space. So just thinking about breastfeeding and how is breastfeeding marketed. So just to give a positive spin off on this, it's not all negative. I would like to highlight one of my students, a master's student, performed a research project where she assessed the Lesh League Facebook page as a case study. And she found there that peer-to-peer support can be positive on a digital platform. And it also increases mothers' self-reported confidence in breastfeeding. So that's kind of the positive take on it. The negative take on it is, of course, that the commercial milk formula companies, the ones who manufacture formula milk, they find spaces and places on digital media platforms where they market their product directly to mothers. And this is not allowed. We actually have a regulation in South Africa around that. So we have progressive policies for infant and young child feeding in South Africa, and also this regulation that we refer to as Regulation 991. And that instructs that commercial milk formula companies are not allowed to have direct contact with mothers. Now, seeing that in person is quite obvious, but when it happens on social media, then it becomes invisible. And some of these platforms are even so hidden, and they have names like Secret Mums Club. So these commercial milk formula companies have really found ways of marketing their products directly to mothers. And also what they do is they invite mothers from the digital platform into another platform. They would say, let's move this conversation to WhatsApp. And then they gather in groups there. And then they have direct contact with mothers where they can share their messages. And of course, in the backdrop, and also very obvious sometimes, the marketing of their products. And if they don't market maybe specifically formula, they also market other products that they manufacture, like commercial complementary foods, and it will have the same branding. So this is where we find cross-branding of products. That is also very powerful, because you recognize the brand, and then you link the formula milk and the complementary feeding to that, or maybe even something like beverages that they make for children, toddlers. So that branding then starts becoming very visible and recognizable, and mothers, because they have this connection with the reps or with this company, start trusting them for information. And the intention is definitely not to inform mothers about breastfeeding, and if they do, that is not allowed either. But the intention is to market their product to mothers. So this space is really contentious, and what we could do about that, we could maybe discuss that later on as we move towards solutions. But the regulation, as I mentioned right in the beginning, it is difficult to monitor these spaces, and it is difficult to often see what is happening because you can't be on social media and all the platforms all of the time. And some of the posts will be featured and then they will be taken down. You'll even see things like these one-time, one-day only specials. So within a specific time period, they will disappear. So you can't always see everything and report everything, but we need to really tighten that. And as I said, maybe as solutions, we can dig into that a little bit later on. But in just in a nutshell, then breastfeeding week starting today and support for all, where we're actually calling on everybody, not just the government and not just healthcare providers, but the whole of society to support mothers in various spaces, including the home, including the workplace, including retail areas, public spaces, to support mothers to continue their breastfeeding journey.
Thanks, Lisanne. I mean, in a sense, it sounds very insidious, right? You know, you're being invited to the secret club where you're going to get assistance and the support that you need. And I think these are the things that, you know, need to be put onto the table so that, you know, young mothers or just mothers in general, people are aware that, you know, that kind of seductive language and manipulative language that's used there is actually, you know, being done for not necessarily your gain. It's for marketing practices and obviously for profit at the end of it all. So I want to bring you in here, Lisa, and I want to ask you, obviously, you know, in your experience, you know, around nutrition and those kinds of things, you know, when a child starts to be introduced, you know, to these kinds of foods and sugars at such a young age, can you just give me an idea how that kind of plays out?
Yes, so what we find is that when children are exposed to those types of products at a young age, so they get exposed to the branding, it's all around them, it's at their schools, it's on billboards, it's on TV, it's on social media, in the games that they play. And so that builds that trust with them from a young age, and they are more likely to want to consume those products. And as we know, those products has negative health impacts. And so we are starting to see that children are starting to develop chronic disease of lifestyle that was usually found in older people. So like diabetes, hypertension, obesity, those types of things, it's starting to affect them at a younger age because they are exposed to these products from such a young age. And the way the marketing strategies work by the industry is they will use you know, the products that are directed at children to create the brand trust, and then they have other products that are not beneficial to anyone's health. And so because the parents already have the trusting relationship with them because of those products that they gave their kids as babies, when they see those brands on products that their children are asking for, when they are a little bit older, they make that positive association with the brand, and so they're more willing to then buy those products for their kids. And you know, overconsumption of those products, it will lead to health issues in the future. And so it just makes the current health problems that we are facing in this country, it just makes it worse. And that often when health issues start as a child, so if a child is obese, it's more likely that it's going to carry on into adulthood. So yeah, it all has a knock-on effect.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite Yeah, like I said, insidious. And I think to be targeting children at such a young age, I guess the idea is to encourage patronage, that becomes also a generational patronage, and also a generational issue of health issues, right?
Yeah.
So I want you to, because, the social media space is kind of what your focal area is, can you like sort of um, give us examples that people should be looking out for? Because I think sometimes people think, "Ah, I'll always know if somebody's going to advertise something. I'm going to be very aware if somebody's selling me something." But I think when it comes to the social media landscape, which is so vast and for all intents and purposes not very regulated, how do these kinds of things creep in just in your everyday life? I mean, I think most people wake up and scroll. So as you're scrolling, these things pop up to you probably.
Yeah. Yes. So some of the marketing techniques that I came across was that it is very sneaky. So, for example, if you look at influencer marketing, they will maybe post a video where they are talking about their day. So they'll be talking about something as simple as, oh, they went shopping, they went to work, or whatever. But while they are having this conversation with their audience to the camera, there will be product placement in the video. And if you're not looking out for something like that, you won't really notice it, but the brand is staring at you in the face. So they'll be maybe making a smoothie, and then there'll be the product next to the blender, with the product label conveniently facing the camera. So you can see exactly what it is, but they never make mention of it in the actual post. There are some sneaky ways that influencers also encourage people to consume the product. So something that I noticed in my research was that influencers will ask their audience to purchase and consume the product and to film themselves doing that. And so they'll ask that their followers post the content and tag them in it so that they can repost it onto their profiles. And if you look at it from a perspective of a young, impressionable person, they will see this as a great opportunity to interact with someone they look up to. And so they'll be more likely to then purchase the product or ask their parents to purchase the product. They'll consume the product. They'll create essentially content to market the product themselves. And to use children and young people in that way, it's very manipulative. So those are some of the tactics that I've seen. There's the usual, health claims and things like that, but that's more direct, I want to say. Whereas these other tactics are more sort of sneaky and it's in the background and you don't pick up on it immediately. So being aware of what's placed in the post, in the influencer's post, being aware of the language that they're using, because often they'll use language like, oh, I used this product and it gave me so much energy and it made me feel so much better and I feel healthier and I can work out more and things like that. The language that they use also makes people think that the product is good for them, without actually knowing what is in the product, what the nutrient composition is. So, to just be more aware when you are looking at influencer content specifically, to just see what's in the post and what they're saying, and what they are hinting at you or encouraging you to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, on your last point around language, right? The language of, oh, I feel so much better and have more energy and whatever it is that similar language that was used in traditional kind of advertising as well, right? I mean, I remember from years back when there was still smoking adverts, that people would be like, smoking Peter Stuyvesant means I'm so cool, I'm on a yacht somewhere, I'm living my best life. And I guess it's a similar kind of language that's also coming into this space now. But I want to go back to, a discussion I overheard between you and Lisanne backstage before we came on around this issue of children, right? Because Lisanne, you're like, well, I'm not really in the social media space, but my children are. And I guess the question for me becomes, this is a space of, what is parents' responsibilities here, because you don't know, what your children are seeing, and how do you pick up on that, because you're not going to be with them all the time. But I also want to go back to, the regulations that you mentioned, the R991, and that, that prohibition or towards direct advertising to children. What does it say around this social media space, this digital space? Does it extend to that? And if not, how can that come into play?
So it does make mention in Regulation 991 of the internet. It doesn't cover all of the different spaces that we now have better defined, but I mean, that to us will cover those spaces. So as I said, it is so much more difficult just to monitor those spaces. Whereas if you see a billboard, or you see a poster, or you see a promotion inside a shop, it is there, and you can take a photograph and you can report it to the National Department of Health. But the internet is just so far-reaching, and there are just too many of these different areas where the companies find a foothold and a stronghold, and then can market their products. And as Lisa mentioned, some of them are quite subtle. They may use a product that they are allowed to market. For older children, maybe a drink or a cereal, but the branding is there, and it is clear who this company is. So the regulation covers it. It is written into our regulation. But our capacity to monitor and our capacity to regulate is restricted in our country. So part of the solutions that we want to put forward here is that in South Africa specifically, although we are advanced in our policies, we have beautiful policies, and we have this regulation, it is just getting more capacity into the government space to monitor and to regulate. But also, the government can't do everything. They can't be everywhere. So we need to, as healthcare professionals, be updated and also upskilled in recognizing transgressions and then making an effort to report those. And we are also too few to do all of that. So we all work with different people on different platforms, and specifically in public health, we do transdisciplinary research work, and we have many stakeholders, multi-stakeholders. So for me, for instance, in the spaces where I can work and with the partners that I work with, it's also my responsibility to share this with them so that they become more vigilant. So we have people from food systems, and we have economists, health economists, we have politicians, we have government partners, and even engineers. So when we work with these people on research platforms and sharing lecturing platforms, I think it's a very good idea then to come together and say, we can't monitor these individually. We don't have the time and the energy and the resources to monitor alone. So we need to bring our partners and stakeholders and the public into this and make the regulations clear, communicate it clearly to the public so that they also understand it, because the legal language is not always understandable. So we need to break it down to say, what should you be looking out for? How can you report a specific transgression? How do you access the form that you need to fill out? And then who do you send it to? So that we have more of this happening at ground level, and not only wait for Department of Health to do it or the government to do all of the action, but also get this working together from the public and also from the professionals. And together, if we put a bit of time into this, each one of us, collectively, we can do so much more.
Yeah, I think you raise a very important point around capacity and how to build that capacity, and how it's a collective effort in order for it to be sustainable. But I think, I guess that the issue there is to firstly agree and acknowledge that there is an issue, and get those people around the table in terms of how do we then, attack the problem. I want to go back to this point that has been raised earlier on around the targeting of this marketing, and I'd like to get your thoughts, Lisa, on this. On, the who are the people who are most likely to be targeted? I mean, other than just children, but a specific sort of, is there a specific demographic that's likely to be targeted? And this is, I'm looking at from a global and a South African perspective, and I ask this because it generally seems to be, people from a lower income sort of bracket end up being the ones who ingest or take in, these ultra processed foods and drinks, and the byproduct of that is then they get these diseases, and they feed into a public health system that's already under strain, and so the problem compounds. So I just wanted to get your inputs on who are the people who are likely targeted, and why.
So I think because usually your low and middle income countries don't necessarily have regulations in place, whereas your higher income countries might have more regulations in place or stricter regulations in place. And so that's why these types of marketing tactics will be targeted towards low and middle income countries. But another point that I picked up on during my research is that a lot of the regulations often are centered around children. So, and it's often children under the age of 12. And so if we're stopping regulations at the age of 12, I mean, they are still children after that. So adolescents are being targeted even more. So I think that if we only focus on regulating child-directed marketing for under 12-year-olds, the focus is going to shift to adolescents because they are the next best audience to target, because they are also susceptible to and impressionable to these marketing tactics. So in my opinion, that would be the group to look at and to also include in regulations.
Yeah, I want to bring you in there as well, Lisa, and just your thoughts, I mean, on the same question. But also, it seems really terrible that at 12 years old, you're still a child. Like 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, you're still a child. So why is that threshold so low?
I think the impressionability is definitely one, and the different ways that the age group is targeted. I mean, we see cartoons and like Lisa mentioned, the influencers, and these young children are already influenced by all of these very specific, idealized products and environments. So I think that is part of it. I've seen in some of the documents, at least from WHO, when they speak about children, they will mention all children under 18. So it's not just the up to 12 years old. And I think this is an interesting move to cover the specific issue that Lisa just mentioned. So in the specific guideline that you also mentioned right in the beginning, Zuki, the policies to protect children from the harmful impact of food marketing that WHO put out. In that document, it's not just the under 12s, but it is extended to under 18s. And that specifically would be to monitor the space of the adolescent and the marketing that happens there. And also the spaces, when they talk about which spaces should be monitored, they very specifically say that it has to be where children gather. So it's not only in the digital platform, but it's also in schools and also in the channels where they are targeted, television channels, and also the time slots that they are very particularly targeted when children watch television. But also they are focusing on where children can be together, and then also where are they in their individual space. So it is quite comprehensive when you come to the guidance that we have received from WHO specifically. But it is, I think, as you can gather from what we are saying here, because these companies are so good at what they do and they have the resources to do what they do, and now they have the platform that has been extended to do what they do, that is making it much more difficult to come with, I don't want to say counterattacks, because that sounds a bit confrontational, but sometimes that's what we need to do. How do we step it up from a health professional side? How do we frame our messages that it is as interesting and not just boring, the same old that we've been saying all along? And I think that's the challenge for us.
I think, just picking up on, oh, sorry. My network kind of went down there. But I wanted to just pick up on your point around the WHO regulations, right? That they provide guidance, right? But they are recommendations, and it's not not imposed. Essentially, is what I'm saying. And I think probably therein needs to be an area of development of how do you I don't want to say make them an imposition, but how do you ensure that our countries adhere to those guidelines, because obviously they are developed to the benefit of everybody's health. But I just want to pick up on this point again that you're saying that the marketing in terms of the spaces that children gather around. So for me specifically, I think around, you go to a sports field and you'll see Coca-Cola signs everywhere, and Coca-Cola will sponsor the team, and, whatever other, brands will sponsor a library here, and, they'll sponsor uniforms here for, whatever the thing is. And I, how do we counter those kinds of things without saying, well, these people are actually providing a service, right? Like a much needed service. You're going to donate a playing field, you're going to donate uniforms. What are the strategies to try and, I guess, counter those kinds of things? Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, anyone of you can jump in on that.
I feel like if the company is sponsoring these types of things out of the goodness of their hearts, then their branding doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
It's very simple. If you are going to be donating money, you don't have to attach your name to it. It can be an anonymous donation. So I think that hopefully when regulations are put in place, there is mention of, making sure that branding isn't put into those spaces, regardless of whether the company is sponsoring a sports team or the sports field or the school, or not.
Yeah, that's true. Lizanne, anything you'd like to add on that?
Now, Zuki, what you are saying is very real. Again, from research that we've done, just observational research, our students drove around schools in Cape Town area, and they documented what was in the public domain. So what was facing from the school grounds out into the public view. And I can mention brand names here, right? Because it's visible. So what you can see is Coca-Cola is there all around in most schools. They would have signposts up, and we know that they are contributing to the worldwide obesity pandemic. So it shouldn't be allowed that they are there. And if you read what is in our school health guidance, and also this isn't even new guidance, that they say that these brandings should not be there. It shouldn't be in the tuck shop in the school. It shouldn't be on the school grounds. And these are facing outward. So it's giving money to the school, but then they are advertising also to the public. And way beyond the reach of that donation or sponsorship that they're given, those billboards and posters hang on school walls and fences for years. So they get much more exposure from whatever they have given the school or the public space. And we really need to focus on providing schools in this case, but also other sponsorship events and opportunities. We have to have the discussion of what is acceptable sponsorship. and get rid of the sponsors that we know that are contributing to our crisis, that are actually fueling the crisis. And that's not so easy always, because the money that comes from these companies are easy money. They will throw it at you. But the alternatives where you will see, okay, what thing is healthy food? Where can we find sponsors that will sponsor that and that will give money and maybe not attach their name to it even? And that is not so easy. We know that because in our own spaces, when we host conferences, when we do symposia, food companies want to sponsor us. They want to be seen in our environment, in the dietitians and nutritionists environment. We have strict policies around that. And we do not accept sponsorship and branding from unhealthy food company or food companies that manufacture unhealthy foods. But it is difficult then to say, okay, now where do we get money that is untainted and still host a decent conference? So we are having those difficult conversations, and we are asking our professionals to provide us with that input so that we go forward together in this, and that we find sources that are available, because they are available. We just need to tap into them. So, and not just fall for the easy money. I think that's kind of my message here.
Yeah, I mean, I think you raise a very valid point, the issue of money and exploiting that gap that people are in need will always come into contention. And I guess it's about how do you think deeper around where you can access those sources of funding. Okay, so I haven't forgotten about the audience. I'm going to bring in some audience questions. The first one is going to Lisa. So this one is from Shoneen Proctor, and Shoneen says, Lisa, given the critical issue of nutrition in ECD, early childhood development, can you cite any digital initiatives or campaigns that positively inform mothers' choices?
So I'm not sure about mothers' choices specifically, but when it comes to positive digital campaigns, I know that healer.org and Community Media Trust, they have a lot of campaigns surrounding bringing awareness to ultra-processed products and the health implications of consuming those. And they have many campaigns that highlight these issues, but also give alternatives to consuming those products. So I'm not too aware about mothers specifically, like campaigns targeted to mothers specifically, but in general, I know that healer.org has some really good campaigns.
Thanks, Lisa. Lisanne, do you know of any, since this is your area of expertise?
Lisa mentioned one very good example in HELA, the Healthy Living Alliance, and the public and the audience can go onto their website and scroll through. They have quite a few case studies that they showcase. I see there was also from the same person online, Shanine Proctor. She asked, has Regulation 991 successfully managed to curtail any brands in contravention? And luckily, yes. So I can cite a few examples that has been successfully curtailed. And the one that I remember very well was from Breastfeeding Week 2018. I think it was 2018, where Nestle put up a pop-up room in Soweto, close to the taxi rank. And they said that mothers are welcome. They displayed the Breastfeeding Week date and the theme, and they said mothers can come and express their milk in this specific pop-up room. And with that, of course, they were marketing themselves. And Department of Health very quickly clamped down on that and closed it down. There are other examples also, again, on the HELA platform. They stopped an online and media activity where Nestle wanted to host what they called a stokvel. So where they were really trying to also clamp or cash in here on a cultural event or a cultural meaning around how people gather. And the campaign that was born very quickly around that was Not Today, Nestle. And Hila managed to get many signatories to stop that from happening. Now, I mentioned Nestle here because they are the biggest manufacturer of commercial milk formula worldwide and also in South Africa. But there are also other companies that manufacture commercial milk formula that have transgressed, and that Department of Health, if we report it and if they are aware of it, then they can do something about it. But that's where our responsibility comes in. So yes, the government has a responsibility, but so do we. And when I say we, I would really like to include not only the healthcare providers, the nutritionists and dietitians, but also the broader healthcare community and, as I mentioned before, the public and our other partners. We should all be looking out for these kinds of transgressions. We should know what companies are allowed to do and what they are not allowed to do. And when we see something, we have the responsibility to report that.
While we're on R911, Kavisha Pillay is asking, does regulation R companies?
Sorry, Zuki, I missed some of your questions.
Oh, sorry, it seems my audio is not clicking. Sorry, am I back? Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay, great. Sorry. So Kavisha Pillay was asking, does R911 only apply to companies, or does it also apply to social media influencers, as what we've been discussing now?
Right. So Regulation 991 looks very specifically at educational material, and that's where they will cover material for the general public around flyers and brochures and newspaper articles, books, and so forth. And they say information on the internet. So in my mind, one could group influences there, but also the internet in general is mentioned in Regulation 991. So it's very much a focus of our regulation. They don't mention the word influencer there. But if influencers are spreading information around products, then that should also be included there. And I think one would be able to build a case that an influencer, if they are paid by a company, then they are working for that company, and then that should be included under the regulation, and it should not be allowed.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think it was an important question to ask, so we can make that specific distinction that it's not just applicable to companies. Okay, we have another question here from Maria Georgievic. The study in BMJ is from 2020. Have some of the irregular tactics by corporates or their influencers continued to the same level or kind of regular tactics in the last year or so?
Maybe I can jump in there. Yes. So the article I think that Maria is referring to is the one by Katie Pereira Kotze et al. And that article is such a nice practical way of seeing the example. So you don't have to be a health professional to understand how that article was written. And it's nice that we have these kinds of articles. And you're asking if that has continued. And yes, my colleague Katie actually shared with me that they are writing an update on that article, and it will appear as a chapter in a book. And they have more examples that of screen grab and advertisements, etc. Not only for in South Africa, the BMJ 2020 article was more for on articles and examples from South Africa, but there are other examples from around the world. So yes, they are still continuing with these irregular tactics. And what we know is that from around 194 countries, over 30, about 36 or 38 countries have regulations in place around marketing and distributing of commercial milk formula. Only around 30 out of the countries in the world. That is not enough. We need many, many more. So about 90 of those countries, or 96 of them, have some regulation in place. That is still not enough. We really need our countries to embrace the code of marketing of breast milk substitutes that is available globally. That guideline is available globally with all of the resolutions and amendments that has been published since the code in the 1980s. So these guidance documents are available. Countries just need to make that commitment to regulate it, as South Africa has done. But South Africa's regulation is outdated and it needs to be updated. And companies have already found loopholes around this regulation that we have. So the government is very much aware of it. Our colleagues in government has communicated with us that they need to tighten the regulation. They know it. So with all of the guidance that have become available since, our own regulation will also be strengthened. So that is good news.
Okay, thanks, Susan. Okay, we have another question here, and maybe Lisa, you can take this one. This is from Yolandi North. And Yolandi says, are there any examples of where other governments or the food industry associations are doing work or have done campaigns to nudge people towards healthier choices?
So I unfortunately don't really, my work doesn't really cover the good campaigns that are out there, but I do know that there are government channels on social media that do post health messages. I'm not aware of any companies that sell, fruits and veg and things like that. I don't know if they have any campaigns, but I do know that the government does. The Department of Health specifically has pages on social media, and they post a lot of health campaigns there. And there are other organizations, like I mentioned, Healer, that also does the health campaigns. And there are also healthcare professionals that have their own pages on social media as well, that have started sharing, bits of health information. And so, it's difficult to find the right information, but once you find someone, if you see the things that they're posting, there's no brands associated with it. There's no products in the background, and you can verify the information that they're giving by doing a bit of your own research. Then you know that that's someone that you can most likely trust with the information that they're giving you.
Thanks. I just want to pick up on that because in the beginning, both of you, I think, referred to this issue of how do we make health more attractive because what we see is like with the social media influencers and what that content looks like. It's very sexy content, right? It's easy to be seduced by it, and it's interesting, it's visually appealing, it sounds right to you, or sounds appealing to you. How do we make health appealing? What are your thoughts around that?
I think that if we try and there's always trends going on social media, either with audios or maybe dance routines or something. So there are healthcare professionals, or sometimes even students that are studying towards becoming healthcare professionals, that have their own pages, and they incorporate some of that into their content and also try and convey some health messages. So I think that that's a good way, or a starting point at least, to try and tap into what's already being done. If we can use things that's already appealing to a younger audience specifically, and try and incorporate very small bits of nutrition information or good health information, that would be a good way to get younger people involved and educated on those topics. And I think also trying to get more students, because they are the younger people, to try and get them involved in creating content like that as well, because they are the ones that can see what's trending. They are the ones that are being targeted with, other types of information. And so they can then use those things and try and spin it in a healthy way so that it's more acceptable and digestible to a younger audience.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. Yeah, I see we have 5 minutes. This discussion has gone by so quickly. I can't believe we only have 5 minutes left. So probably I'd like us to look towards our closing comments in terms of what we would want people to take away, from our discussion today, the really important touch points for them to think about. And also apply, as they surf the net. People still say surf the net. I don't know, such an outdated thing to say, but as they scroll on their social media. So I think let's start with you, Lisanne, on what your closing remarks would be.
Sure. If I can take one step back just to answer Yolandi, there are campaigns. The side-by-side campaign is the one that Lisa referred to. So that's Department of Health, and they really have very good content that they share to mothers through that one. Avocados, yeah, they've had a very nice campaign before. We used to have a 5-a-day campaign about fruit and vegetables. That has ceased, but there are also other examples. I think Lisa also mentioned some of those. Lilish, the Facebook page, was one that I mentioned earlier. Just in closing, I think what makes it a bit difficult for us as healthcare professionals to really have a huge presence on social media is that we are regulated professions. And I think the public needs to be aware of that. We cannot just go onto social media and do and say anything that we want to. We are governed by the Health Professions Council of South Africa, and we have to abide by their ethical rules and standards. And we have to adhere to, specifically, they have guidelines on social media and what we can and can't do there. So I agree with Lisa. We need to be better at what we do. And there are dietitians and nutritionists that are really doing good work in this space. Given the boundaries that we have, they are still doing very good work. And I think we need to support them, and they need to continue doing what they do. From an academics perspective, I can teach my students those boundaries. I can teach them what they can and can't do, but they are the new generation, and they come with fresh ideas and new initiatives, and they can assist us in moving into that space more effectively. But I am not convinced that we should just all conform and move onto social media and try and do our stuff there. I believe that we all have our strong points, and we have spaces where we can be effective, whether that be the policy space, maybe if we have the influence that to work there, we should do it. And academics can move into that space with government and politicians, and we can also then make sure that our policies and regulations are strong, so we can have that kind of presence. And then, of course, our partners, as I said, we should bring them along, and the public is very important here. Our social responsibility partners in really looking out for misinformation and curbing misinformation, reporting transgressions, so that it becomes a teamwork effort and not just us individuals trying to put out the fires that we see on social media. So I think a collective effort will be fantastic. You need to upskill yourself, of course, on all the different platforms where we can share messages. But yes, not only on social media, there are other spaces also that we are strong at, and we should embrace that.
Okay. Thank you so much, Lisanne. Well rounded off. Lisa, closing words from you?
Yes, I agree with everything that Lisanne just said. And I also want to just add that we as healthcare professionals, as dietitians, we want to always try and educate the public about spotting misinformation. And I think that having them be educated is a big part of solving this problem. So we definitely do need regulations in place. We do need some better health information online, but we also need the public to be aware of the marketing tactics that are targeted towards them, and to also try and teach their children as they learn, to also teach their children to spot these things as well, because the sooner they are aware of that, the better. Because once people realize that something is being marketed towards them, they will be less likely to be enticed by the performance that they see online.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lisa. All right. So thank you to everyone who joined us today in our food justice webinar. Hopefully you walk away from this discussion feeling more empowered to be able to spot when you are having marketing thrown at you in very manipulative ways, so that you can make better informed decisions for you and your children. And with that, I bid you good afternoon.
Thank you.